All right. Sorry. Microphone, mask. All right. Glasses, we're all set. Just a little COVID update here for us at headquarters. As some of you may know, yesterday we were informed by a permanent mission that they had 5 positive cases among their staff. The UN Medical Service immediately initiated contact tracing with the full cooperation of that permanent mission. As of now, all in-person meetings have been suspended for today. I do expect a bit more information on all this later this afternoon, and a note to our staff will also be going out shortly. Turning to the Security Council, Geir Pedersen, Special Envoy for Syria, spoke to Council members by video conference today from Beirut. He described his recent visit to Damascus, including his meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister Walid al-Moallem. He said he will seek to deepen his dialogue with the Syrian parties and key players in the months ahead in the reviewing where we stand on Resolution 2254 and seeking to identify how best to develop a wider process. Mr. Pedersen noted that Syria's front lines have not changed in recent months, and the number of civilians killed during that period has, according to monitoring groups, been the lowest level since 2011. But he warned that the situation in Syria, including the involvement of foreign militaries, continues to be tense. Emergency Relief Coordinator Mark Lowcock also briefed the Security Council on the humanitarian crisis in the country. He said that he was alarmed at the violence and insecurity impacting civilians and aid workers, and he called for their protection, as in shelling in frontline areas in the northwest, as well as airstrikes in Idlib have continued. Mr. Lowcock also updated the Council on the humanitarian impact of the economic crisis, humanitarian access, and the assistance being provided by humanitarian organizations across Libya. Turning to Tanzania, which is preparing for general elections on the 28th of October, in a statement we issued yesterday, the Secretary General called on all national stakeholders to ensure that the polls are conducted in an inclusive and peaceful manner. He recalled that an inclusive electoral process and a broad, effective participation of political parties on their candidates, particularly women, remain essential for safeguarding the progress made by Tanzania in consolidating stability, democracy, and development. The Secretary General urged all political leaders and their supporters to participate in this exercise peacefully and to refrain from violence. He calls on the authorities to provide a safe and secure environment which will allow Tanzanians to exercise their civil and political rights. The Secretary General, in another statement we issued, said he was following with great concern the violent incidents which have occurred in Afghanistan over the past several days. These incidents have claimed the lives of 40 civilians and injured many others, many of them women and children. He strongly condemned the suicide attacks that targeted civilians and an education center on October 24th in Kabul, which killed at least 25 civilians and injured 50 more, most of them young students. He recalls that deliberate attacks against civilians are serious violations of international humanitarian law and may amount to war crimes. He said those who carry out these crimes must be held accountable and that we stand in solidarity with the people and government of Afghanistan. Two other notes on Afghanistan, where our humanitarian colleagues inform us that heavy fighting that started on October 11th between the Afghan National Forces and non-state armed groups continuing near Lashkargah in Helmand province, south of the country. Local authorities initially estimate that 35,000 people were displaced, along with our humanitarian partners. We are still trying to verify these numbers. We're nearly 9,700 people displaced confirmed to date. The violence has stretched hospitals in the town to capacity. According to WHO, 15 health facilities have been targeted, impacting thousands of people, obviously. We are closely coordinating with the government and our partners on the ground to provide assistance to the people who need it. Local authorities, through the support of the UN Children's Fund, continue to supply water in displacement locations. Food aid is also being provided. Overall, 6 million people have been reached with humanitarian assistance under the 2020 Afghan Humanitarian Response Plan since the beginning of the year. And last note on Afghanistan, a new report released by the UN mission in the country shows the number of Afghan civilians killed and injured in the conflict has failed to slow since the start of the intra-Afghan peace talks, yet the overall civilian casualty figures for the first 9 months of 2020 dropped by about 30% compared to 2019. More information is online. And in some parts of Yemen are showing acute malnutrition rates among children under 5 that are the highest ever recorded there, with more than 500,000 cases in the southern districts. That's according to a food analysis released by FAO, UNICEF, and the World Food Programme, along with some of our partners. The analysis, which is for 133 districts in southern parts of Yemen that are home to 1.4 million children under the age of 5, reveals a near 10% increase in cases of acute malnutrition in 2020. At least 250,000 pregnant or breastfeeding women are also in need of treatment for malnutrition. Experts warn that actual number is likely higher, and the drivers for malnutrition in Yemen have worsened in 2020. In order to save lives, avert further worsening of the situation, we are appealing for more than $50 million to urgently scale up nutrition programs, including treatment for children with severe acute malnutrition. At the same time, funding is also needed to scale up food, water, sanitation, health programs, including immunization. And in response to the continued escalation of conflict in and around Nagorno-Karabakh, the World Health Organization today said this is delivering shipments of medical supplies consisting of trauma, surgical kits to Armenia and Azerbaijan. WHO said that emergency supplies arrived in Yerevan on October 23rd, and those destined for Baku are currently in transit. Supplies include trauma kits, with each containing medicine and provisions necessary to ensure post-traumatic care of hundreds of injured people. Provided to the ministries of health in Armenia and Azerbaijan, they are used across public health systems to deliver care to those in need. Of course, we reiterate our call for an immediate cessation of hostilities in the conflict zone. And today, the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, joined with the African Union Commissioner for Peace and Security, Ismail Chergui, arrived in the Central African Republic. They will be joined there by the President of the Economic Community for Central African States, Gilberto Verissimo. Their 3-day visit is intended to advance peace and stability in the country in the context of the upcoming elections, the first round of which are scheduled for December 27th. They will meet with senior government officials, political parties, civil society, women's groups to call for collective engagement to ensure the holding of credible, inclusive elections, as well as the implementation of a political agreement signed by the government and 14 armed groups in February of last year. Mr. Lacroix, as you recall, wrapped up a visit to Sudan, where he took part in a meeting with the governor of Sudan, Commissioner Chergui, and was joined by Atul Khare, the head of the Department of Operations for the UN. They discussed support and cooperation for the UN-AU hybrid operation in Darfur as it draws down, and how the best the UN can assist the peace agreement is implemented. Quick note from Ecuador, where a UN team there is led by the resident coordinator, Lina Savelli, and is working with authorities to address the impact of the pandemic. The team has been focusing on small and medium companies to keep them open, safeguard jobs. UN Development The program, UNHCR and the UN Migration Agency have launched a digital startup initiative that has reached over 120,000 businesses with guidelines on how to boost their capacity to deliver their product and services online. This also targets migrant and refugee workers. For its part, UNFPA is co-financing a $4 million initiative with the government to work with authorities on recommendations for maternal care, delivery, postpartum, and contraception information to meet the family planning needs of Ecuadorians. And they're also supporting the authorities' response in northern and southern borders, including in the Amazon region, mobilizing resources for testing kits, personal protective equipment for health officials, and training on sexual reproductive health for local authorities to target 500,000 people. Our friends at the UN Conference on Trade and Development, better known as UNCTAD, reveal in their latest reports that global foreign direct investment flows fell 49% in the first half of 2020 as compared to last year. This was due to the economic fallout from the pandemic. Developed economies saw the biggest fall in FDI, reaching an estimated $98 billion in the first 6 months, a decline of 75% since last year. Our friends in Bonn at the the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change announced the winners of this year's UN Global Climate Action Awards. This year's recipients range from the Caribbean's only carbon-neutral hotel in Aruba to the world's first platform fully dedicated to green bonds and the launch of the first all-women solar team in Lebanon to challenge gender stereotypes in the male-dominated construction sector. More information on line. And to end on a good note, Cameroon pays its regular budget dues in full, becoming the 131st member state to do so. Sorry, a lot of stuff today. James.
Yeah, more on the cases at the Niger mission. Do we know whether the permanent representative has tested positive or anyone else from that mission who has attended an in-person meeting at the Security Council? Because that would obviously make things much more serious.
I am at this point unable to confirm the name of the mission because it's really up to them to come forward. We've been in touch with them, and I expect something to be released from the permanent mission in question soon. What I can tell you is that they have been cooperating fully with the medical service and have been in touch with us, and we've immediately launched the contact tracing.
So just explain that to us, the contact tracing. Clearly, the Niger mission to the UN, you won't confirm it, but that's where it is not on site here. So that, I assume, is the responsibility of the city of New York.
Right. I mean,
how does this mesh together?
Sorry, let me backtrack. We're talking about the contact tracing for delegates that were in the building and attended meetings. Obviously, so we're focused on contact tracing within our community here. Obviously, as everyone else does, people have a responsibility to the host authorities, and we would encourage, as a matter of course, everyone to cooperate with those health authorities. Madame, and then Edie. Celia.
Talking about those 5 cases, how come the UN does not check the temperature of anyone entering the building? Would it be...
No, listen, I will venture into a field in which I'm not an expert, but I think that would just give you a false sense of comfort. It's not a telltale. A lot of people are asymptomatic. So I'm not. It's not an effective method. Yes, please.
It's about Afghanistan. In light of the attacks, does the UN still think that it's a good idea to include the Taliban in the government?
Well, let's backtrack here. There are intra-Afghan talks. It is up to the Afghan people to decide what the future will be. I cannot predict what the outcome of the talks will be. What is important for us is that whatever comes out of these talks, it guarantees that the development gains made by Afghan women, youth, and other vulnerable groups are not erased, that we do not go backwards, that those rights are guaranteed. Edie.
Thanks, Steph. A few follow-ups on Pakistan. Does the Secretary General have any comment on the apparent bombing at this madrasa in Peshawar that killed 8 students and injured over 130 others? And I have some more.
Sure. We of course condemn the attack. We join the statement released by UNICEF a bit earlier today, in which they condemn the attack. And I think, as UNICEF said, the targeting schools must never be targeted. Schools always need to remain a safe environment. We extend our condolences to the victims, wish a speedy recovery. We extend our condolences to the families of those who perished and wish a speedy recovery of those who were injured, and stand in solidarity with the people and government of Pakistan. Excuse me.
And apparently the Armenians and Azerbaijanis are still going at it despite the third ceasefire attempt. Does the Secretary General have any reaction?
Well, we continue to express our concern and, frankly, our frustration, I think, at the continued fighting, the reports of continued fighting. As you mentioned, there were 3 agreements that were 3 times. I mean, the parties agreed to a humanitarian ceasefire. It is critical that they actually live up to what they've committed themselves to do. What we need immediately is a ceasefire to ensure that humanitarian aid gets through. If you'll recall, a few days ago, we flagged some numbers from WHO, which said the cases of COVID-19 had skyrocketed, both in Armenia and Azerbaijan. And, the Secretary General has been calling for a global ceasefire. I mean, this is a prime example of humans continuing to kill other humans while the virus wins. And, sorry, go ahead. No, I'm done.
And just as a follow-up on the no in-house meetings at UN headquarters today, do we know how long this lack of any in-house meetings will take place?
My guess and my estimate is that we'll continue for a few more days. We had there was a meeting just before I came in with all the relevant in-house parties, the medical service support, conference services. So we're working on a way forward. Obviously, whether or not meetings, all of this has to be done with the approval of member states, and I'm sure Brendan will have a few more words to say on that from the President of the General Assembly. We have the General Assembly, we have the Security Council, we have ECOSOC. The Secretary General's thoughts is that, the generals. Let me try this. This has been a long. I think I hurt more than my finger on my bike. For the Secretary General, it is of foremost importance that staff be safe, that delegates be safe, that you be safe, all those who are coming into the building. I think our staff have done a tremendous job during the lockdown of continuing to support member states in the meetings they've had, continuing to support the work that we do here that enable us to have some minimum of in-house. So today the meetings will be virtual. We'll see what happens in the next few days, but we should have clarity by the end of today. Mr. Sato, and then we'll go to the screen, and then Carla.
Thank you. Follow-up question. So, do you see any the change of the footprint number in the UN premise from yesterday and today?
Oh, from yesterday and today, I didn't get we get the screening numbers 24 hours later. So, over the last 2-3 weeks, it's been about 1,400 number of swipes going in every day. By the end of today or early tomorrow morning, I'll have the numbers for today.
Do you hear the voice from the UN staff? There's some sense of worry about this case?
Well, we're obviously in touch with the staff union. Our medical service has been in touch with them from early this morning. We want to make sure that everyone is safe, that the work of the UN continues, as it has. So, as I said, we'll have a bit more details later on. I'm going to go to Benny.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So now that he had time to contemplate, does the Secretary General, who took note of the agreement between Israel and Sudan, does he think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I think if you read the statement that we issued, I think it has a very positive tone to it. Carla.
Since my last question to you, Honduras has signed the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, and it's now at an entry into force stage. Can you explain exactly what that means? Because when I asked, you told me it would be a legal question. I asked Mr. Klein, your friend and my colleague. He said basically it has no impact. And since the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is, Article 6 is being violated by all the nuclear powers, I say this in all cynicism. What is accomplished by these?
I think the treaty itself is a very important message on the need for total elimination of nuclear weapons, and I think that's reflected in what the Secretary General said. Its most immediate effect is that when it comes into force, which it has, is that the treaty will become binding international law for those states who have ratified it. Those states will also have to submit an initial declaration regarding any past or present nuclear weapons under their control within 30 days of the entry into force. The Secretary General is very well aware of the general climate, and he's consistently called for dialogue among member states so that they may return a common vision and a path leading to the total elimination of nuclear weapons, despite the differences over the treaty itself. The frustrations and concerns that underlie must be acknowledged and addressed. In that spirit, he continues he supports continuing engagement between supporters and critics of the treaty. And if I'm mistaken, I think it enters into force on the 22nd. It's now just been ratified. There's a delay.
Has he made any comment about the fact that none of the nuclear weapons?
I mean, as I said, I would refer to the statement he issued. I would refer to the past remarks he's made on nuclear weapons, and the Secretary General, as I said, is fully aware of the general climate and differing positions. Mr. Bays.
You've made a number of references to the medical service here at UN headquarters. The head of that medical service left early on in the pandemic. Is that vacant? Is that job still unfilled?
It's under recruitment, but it doesn't mean that the head is vacant, so to speak. We have an acting director, Dr. Bernard Lennartz, who's been fully engaged and doing a great job with his team. He briefs the Secretary General every morning. So, I mean, the work of the medical service continues. Obviously, recruiting public health officials during this time is not an easy task. Recruiting at the UN is never an easy task, as some may have observed. But it doesn't, it in no way means that the medical service is a lead or less. On the contrary. Okay. Toby and then Gloria. Toby? Yes, and then I see you, Iftikhar.
Sorry, Steph, I didn't have a question.
Oh, good. That's good. Don't think of one. Gloria and then Iftikhar.
Is the isolated, remote indigenous tribes, are they at all affected by this virus? Do we know?
Well, from what I've read, I know the indigenous peoples are, especially we've seen in different parts of South America and other places in the world, in the Americas in general, are vulnerable and at high risk. Iftikhar, and then Abdul Hamid.
Thank you, Steph. My question was asked by Edie, but I want to know whether you will be issuing a formal statement on the blast in Peshawar, Pakistan.
I'll see if there is one, but I think I made the Secretary General's position clear in the condemnation of this horrific attack on yet another educational facilities. We've seen those in Afghanistan. We've seen them in Cameroon. Wherever these schools are, they should never be a target. Abdel Hamid.
Stéphane, I have two questions. when the French teacher Samuel Paty was assassinated, the Secretary General and the High Representative of Alliance of Civilization both, rightfully so, condemned the killing. However, a few days later, two French Muslim women walking near Tour Eiffel, both they were stabbed in front of their children on what is called a hate crime. There was no statement from neither. And also, a mosque was ransacked by thugs near Paris, and the prayers were brutalized, and also there is no reaction. I mean, why in one case, I don't want to compare the two crimes. The two crimes are heinous, but there should be some statement condemning the hate crimes as well?
Look, we condemn hate crimes wherever and whenever they occur. I think on this, and again, I hate to enter into a compare and contrast. I don't recall, there was no formal statement after the horrific killing of the teacher in Paris. I was asked a question, I reacted. You're asking me a question on this. I'm also reacting and condemning any and all hate crimes, condemning attacks on religious facilities, on churches, mosques, synagogues. We have repeatedly done that, and so has the High Representative. Okay, James Reinl.
I have a second question.
Oh, go ahead, Abdelhamid. You're allowed.
Sorry, can you unmute me?
No, go ahead. You're not muted.
Okay. My second question about a Palestinian singer. His name is Mohammed Assaf. He was Goodwill Ambassador for UNRWA for some time. He's the winner of Arab Idol, and he came and performed here in the United Nations. He used to cross the bridge to the West Bank and perform repeatedly. He's very popular, and he's a nationalist as well. So Israel revoked his permission to enter the Palestinian territory for no reason except that he sings sometimes for the cities of Haifa, Akka, and Nazareth. Is that a crime in the view of the Secretary General?
I have listen. Let me take a look. I had not heard anything about. I remember the person in question, but let me take a look. Okay, I will leave the. James. Sorry, James Reinl. Yes, and then I'll leave for Brendan. James,
don't forget about me, please.
No. Trust me, I know I couldn't. As much as I can try, it won't work. Go ahead.
You can try. It's a quick question on the Russian airstrike on Turkish-backed forces in northwest Syria. There's been retaliation, ongoing violence today. Mr. Pedersen mentioned it in the council. Has the SG been in contact with Ankara or Moscow about this? Is there any message to the parties?
The message to the parties is what Mr. Pedersen delivered. I'm not aware of the Secretary General having contact with the parties on this specific issue. That would be something for Mr. Pedersen. Okay, Brendan, all yours. And we will let you know if we continue in-person briefings here tomorrow before the end of the day. Thanks.